No, sure. Um, I wrote a presentation, aspects of justified law enforcement. It reads as follows: Constitution Day celebration was organized. Eminent dignitaries like Attorney General of India, the CGI, and the Royal Prime Minister have addressed the gatherings of the scholars and law professionals at Supreme Court Bar Association. They expressed their solidarity for ensuring availability of system support to the victims, and victims should be appropriately classified. As I express my thoughts, there are such as referred classifications for classification of victims as deprived, means those people, they are deprived of their rights. They are not being availed with their provided rights and entitlements. And if they were treated like this, they were tortured. Means their fundamental rights were violated. They were deprived of their law of natural justice, that everybody deserves equal treatment for manifestation of their fundamental rights. Outcasted means those people, they were what we can say separated or excluded from the mainstream of the society. Abandoned means those people, they were like left by someone to struggle with their own fate, and they were deprived of the social support system. Abducted abducted means those people, they were abducted by some people for their evil intent. Then about kidnapped, some people kidnapped someone, like they are forcefully imposing their restrictions on some persons. Another one categories of victims could be raped, which they were raped. Then survivor of accidents, like if certain kind of accidents happen and they survived those accidents, they are hurted, they are injured. So in this manner, they need to be availed with proper treatment and revival facilities, as well as they should be provided by medico legal support system also. Then robbed means their property were robbed, looted by some person with evil intent, by overpowering, by acquiring their resources. So those people, they were robbed, they are also victims. Looted, like if you have money or something else, but people looted those things, so they left you with nothing, only to struggle. and feel the pain and grief of your deprivation. People were cheated, cheating on the verge of causing pain and suffering to the person. The next class is deceived. Deceived in several manners. They could express their pain, their grief that they were deceived in such a manner that caused them several injuries and deprivation of the opportunities. They were attacked with intent to cause serious physical injury. It happens due to the violent clash. People might be attacked with intent to cause serious physical injury. So they are the victims. They may approach to access medical legal support system for manifestation of their justice and fundamental rights. Victims trapped in emotional dilemma with evil intent or enmity by suspected accused. Trapped in emotional dilemma with evil intent that you are geoparadized with your own struggle, with your own state of living, by whom they intend to exploit you, they intend to harm you, they pose some sort of enmity, rivalry. So, these are the class of victims trapped in emotional dilemma with evil intent of enmity by suspected accused. Then those people are also considered as victims if they are allegated of crime. Because if allegations are being imposed, it will lead to imposition of associated restrictions that will restrict their access to the resources, to the support system. Another victims, economically poor class. If people are struggling to earn their bread and butter for their family, they are struggling with the scarcity. They are vulnerable of exploitations. They are vulnerable of debt trap. These are the class, the economically poor class should be considered as victim by virtue of law. Farmers, because there are related uncertainties with the cropping pattern, cultivation, crop loss, lack of market linkage, destruction of or decay of their cultivated crops due to the uncertain seasonal changes, then they may feel that their labor went in vain. They need to avail with a special provisions and protection. Prisoners of war and refugees, they suffers special kind of legal orthodoxy. So, a special provisions should be ensured for their classification. Adopted child. If an individual is adopted by someone at their childhood, they may be treated differently with respect to the earned privilege by children's of their biological parents. Victims are survivors of natural calamities, drought, volcano eruption, tsunami, landslides, overflood, lightning, tornado, or other kinds of natural calamities, earthquake that had caused severe loss to the life and livelihood of the peoples. There are evident examples of the victims of Kutch, victims of the tragedy of Uttarakhand, as people are suffering. Recently broadcasted the information by UN about the inhabitants of the horns of Africa that they are suffering from persistent rain since last 4 years. There are evident challenges associated with their survival. They are the victims. Physically challenged peoples like deaf, dumb, visionless, speechless, or other kind of physically challenged peoples. They are the victims. They need to be considered to ensure availability of related support system for their survival. Mentally retarded peoples. Those people they suffered several trauma, several pains, or such circumstances that cause severe injury to their mind. They need to be considered with special provisions of reservations and protections to them. Child married because they might lack opportunities for their livelihood, their development. They might be deprived of their education. They might be associated risk for child rearing at tender age that might cause death of the individual. Child says sex abused. These are the special class of victims, and that should be classified. They should be ranked. Then forced prostitution, suffering, tortures in different brothels, then domestic violence, those they are suffering from domestic violence. There are associated circumstances that may restrict or prohibit them to access support system for law enforcement. There are barriers and restrictions related with their relationship with their in-laws. They are the victims and the primary beneficiaries of law enforcement. Then people suffering from property or land issues because there are historical evidences for intensified disputes and struggle due to the property and land issues as it was documented and explained by holy sacred text of Bhagavad Gita, because there are related struggles of civilization, of socialization of the peoples due to the property and land issues. So the causes should be identified properly so that it could be resolved. Victims are disputed person of employee employer or employment relationships. If there are clash, struggle, conflict of interest between employee and employer, it may cause problem or challenge to the employee, as well as employers are also prone of danger. And if employment is being affected, it will ultimately affect the accessibility to the livelihood opportunities, and they may suffer personality deterioration. So the related factors should be identified and managed properly. Victims are deceived of business affairs by their partners, by the stakeholders, by the business owners, by the investors, or due to the related affairs of business operation. Victims are accused of illicit affairs because they may struggle, they may suffer the pain, risk, and threat of their life by the accuser. Victims are orphanage. They were left at tender age by their parents and nurtured by their nurses. Victims are diseased if they are suffering from certain kinds of diseases. They are the victims because they are experiencing the pain and inability associated with the extent of their illness. Victims are the victims of health emergency like COVID-19 or corona pandemic, as it had adversely affected the life and livelihood of the people across the globe. Victims are bonded labor. If they are forced to work in harsh circumstances, in adverse circumstances, in such a circumstances that may cause serious harm to their life, their health, they are prone to accidents due to the risky working environments. Victims are child laborers. because they are vulnerable of trapped into the vicious cycle of poverty. Victims are victim of false accusations due to the enmity. If someone alleged or accused you, you will be victimized due to the imposition of false allegations or accusations. And if someone accused and accessed legal system with enmity, with the intent of harm, with the intent to harm you, then the related procedures would be followed and you would be deprived of your opportunities. You will be suffering. Victims are addicted of drugs and other narcotics. So what were the factors that caused them to harm themselves? It needs to be identified and resolved. Victims are the people trapped into the vicious cycle of poverty, or their life is threatened, that they may starve to die. Victims are those people that were separated from their beloved family members because they lack that support system for their well-being. They are suffering. Victims are female widow that they were left alone due to the death of their husband, or victims are, I termed it as male widow, means those people the wife died, they lack the opportunity and the associated support system for manifestation of their happiness, calmness, contentment. Victims are transgenders because they are vulnerable of suffering from stigma and discriminations, tortured from the society members. There should be a special provisions for those peoples. Victims are religious leaders because society and people expect from them that they will receive boon from the God. They will receive boon from the God, that money will appear in front of them by itself so that they can earn and buy their livelihood. Victims are religious leaders. Deprived, they might be forced to ask for donations. They might be deprived of their livelihood opportunities. The same principles or same circumstances applies for Padri, Maulvi, or Pope or other related designations. Victims are drivers. If they are riding train, bus, auto, or anything, any public vehicles, public transport carriers, they might suffer. Victims are survivors of riots that cause serious injury and breach of trust. that they would be protected, they would be supported, there are favorable and habitable environment, there are supportive people around. It may cause their isolation. Victims are survivor of mob lynching. If people were attacked by a group of people with able intent to harm them, to kill them, they might lack or lose the trust on the supporting society. Victims are alleged persons of superstitious belief and witchcraft. Like you have supernatural power. The superstition, if allegations of superstitions are imposed, people may have that different kind of elusive expectations from you. So victims are alleged of superstitious beliefs and witchcraft. Victims are old age persons because they may lack the power, the capacity to manage their life and livelihood. Victims are orphanage. Unmarried are also prone to victimizations if they were not married for a long period of time, like 30 year, 40 year. They might be alienated, outcasted, separated. They might lack the support system. Victims are migrated because due to the migrations they are excluded from the normal system of social security schemes that is being offered by government to the native local residents. Victims are those people, they were provoked to commit suicide. Victims are human trafficked if they were trafficked by some persons, trafficked in the sense they were trapped in such a dilemma that caused them to suffer from deprivation. Victims are suspected trapped of organized crime if several people are involved into some planned crime and people are trapped, they may feel unable to overcome. There are related factors for their rescue, rehabilitation, and to ensure safety of their life. Victims are ransomed and blackmail people. There might be false allegations associated with ransom and blackmail if someone is not paying the due amount for your earning. You may call them rapidly, you may contact them rapidly. They may impose false allegations of ransom that I am being ransomed. They might morphem the associated evidence, and there are associated challenges in unorganized sectors due to the lack of proper documentation and breach of trust by peoples. Victims might be alleged of blackmailing someone, but they may have their different intent. So the plaintiff and opponents both need to be classified, screened, examined, interrogated, investigated with proper system so that the nature of associated circumstances could be revealed for its proper dispute resolutions. Victims are slum dwellers because they are prone to different diseases. They are deprived of opportunities. Victims are beggars. And there are many more groups of people that could be classified and included into this so that related provisions could be framed and implemented for manifestation of the fundamental human rights of all the people. Hence, as per my opinion, there should be further mapping of the conditions of the victims to estimate the extent of their suffering, to avail immediate relief and protection to their life. There should be further mapping of the conditions of the victims. If some people approach to access legal support, there should be activation of immediate humanitarian relief to them for documentation, for proper filing, for accessing emergency relief, for their food, for their medical counseling, for their treatment, to quarantine them from the life threatening circumstances. Unless and until they would be protected, how they could access the support system to earn their justice. So, there should be further mapping of the conditions of the victims to estimate the extent of their suffering, to avail immediate relief and protection to their life. This should be followed by the process of prosecution, hearing, and law enforcement. We, the people of India, we, Indian, expressed our commitment on the Constitution Day to emerge as a welfare nation state. So, the related law enforcement, related framing of policies and schemes are mandatory for protection of the fundamental rights of every individual, and it should be accomplished with the quest and devotion for accomplishment of one's fundamental duties according to the provided provisions of the Indian constitutions. So these are the related concerns that I have expressed. So I would request the Honorable Excellencies and dignitaries to consider the genuine concerns associated with the social context of peaceful coexistence and express our solidarity for sustainable development. Thank you. Thank you very much.